real conversations, and some hard truths. Gangs, drugs, and guns. Giving a voice to those willing to sacrifice. We have stories that need to be told. We have lessons that need to be taught. Protect and serve. Welcome to The Quiet Professional. All right, welcome back, everybody. We're going to get right into things today. I have Derrick Dotson with me. He is the founder and CEO of the Black Sanctuary. Derrick is a longtime public servant with more than 20 years of experience in both law enforcement and private security. Following the deaths of multiple Black Americans in 2020, Derrick felt there was a lack of guidance from the media and established and informed leaders in response to fatalities involving police. Derrick began sharing his career knowledge with companies and private citizens, as he believed if people understood more about policing and the use of force, interactions with police would be more productive and uneventful. As a Black man with the experience of being a law enforcement use of force instructor, teaching similar skills that have killed many Black Americans, including a loved one, Derrick presents a unique dual perspective. He has been the subject of dozens of traffic stops and has been the subject of stop and frisk. The dynamics of these experiences, combined with his expertise, make for an intriguing yet educational perspective. So welcome, Derrick.
Thank you, Nathan. I appreciate it.
We've had a couple chats. We talked for a while, extended period on the phone. I like some of the stuff that you're putting out. I think it's really good messaging, especially in the schools. So I'm glad to have you on here. I think this will be a really productive conversation, and maybe it'll get you some more opportunities up in Canada, not just the US.
I'd love that. I'd absolutely love that.
So maybe we can start at the beginning, because I think you have a very interesting life story. And as we had spoken about before, can you kind of talk to us about where you come from and growing up? And maybe in there, you kind of talk about your interactions with police.
Sure. So, I'm originally from New York, and I had the experience of, my parents actually grew up in the South. My father was from Florida. My mother came up in Alabama. They very much grew up during that time of very intense civil rights. And they, once they moved to New York, we had a very different experience as far as their perspective in regards to law enforcement and police. My parents, most of my family never really trusted the police. And so it was really having that type of perspective very early on about, police interaction, or who the police are, what they do, what they could possibly do to you, how Black Americans are seen, et cetera. That, I had that type of interaction very early on with my own family. Unfortunately, some of my family spent some time in and out of jail and prison, not my immediate family, but some of my extended family. And so having that type of experience and seeing what they went through, their perspective, kind of, especially as a kid, it pushes you in a certain direction, and not having any other type of guidance. That's it. And that's what a lot of people come up with. They either have what they hear, their own opinions that they form, or they see something in the news or the news media, nowadays social media.
Yeah.
But back then it was just what I heard and what I saw and what I was taught. Fast forward, I had my very first traffic stop when I was 16. And it was scary to me because of all the things that I heard. And, I was at a T intersection, came to a T intersection, stopped, at least I thought I stopped, made a right turn. I get lit up. And the officer came out of nowhere. I swear I looked both ways. Don't know where he came from. He's behind me. I pull over, and I'm doing the things that I think I'm supposed to do. So he comes up, he's like, I need your license and registration. I'm like, yes, sir. And he kind of looks at me a little bit weird. I gave him my permit. I didn't have a license. I had a permit. And he looks at it and says, oh, you don't even have a license. This is the permit. And he looks closer and says, this permit is expired. I'm like, oh, sir, I had no idea. And he kind of looks at me a little weird again and says, where do you live? And I said, I live, behind here. And he was like, so you don't have a license and you're running stop signs in your own neighborhood. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to jail.
Yeah.
Like, forget about it. And so I was like, sir, I apologize. And again, he looks at me a little bit weird, and he takes the permit. He says, I'll be right back. He leaves, comes back, and he looks at me for it feels like a few seconds, but he looks at me and says, are your parents in the military? And I say, no, sir. Why? He says, because no one around here ever calls me sir.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm like, sir, I don't know what to tell you about that. I just wanted to interact and be, appropriate. And he says, I'm going to let you off because, I appreciate how you, spoke to me. And I really appreciate that. I'm going to let you off, but you're going to park this car and you're not going to drive it again until you get a license. You understand? I was like, yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
Turned around and went home. That changed a lot for me just because of that interaction. And I saw the difference of what I was taught. And I just wanted to try something that day. I was like, well, what if I don't do these things that I was taught, that it didn't feel right anyway?
Mm.
Like, hey, don't talk to police, don't go around them. If you do, you're a snitch, that type of thing. And so once I decided to try something different and it worked, like, okay, maybe there's something to this. And, having that type of experience very early on sat with me, and it really did teach me a lot very early on. And so, thinking about that, as I have pursued this experience in the Black Sanctuary, it keeps coming back to me as I continue to talk to young people and parents about these types of things. So that's a little bit about me growing up and how I kind of ended up here.
What maybe kind of insight for some people? What were your parents telling you back in those days? Like, just don't trust police, or is it kind of like you see now where people say, I don't know, if you get stopped by the police, you're basically going to get shot on a traffic stop. So there's like these extremes. Was it kind of the same back then? Has anything changed to today's narratives?
They don't seem like they've changed very much. That's a very good question. I think the majority of what I was taught was, yes, you can't trust the police
Mm.
at all, right? And you have seen some of that, and there was reason to believe that some of these things would happen because they have happened. Even today, some of these things happen where officers aren't always doing the right thing,
Mm-hmm.
and the good thing about that is that it's being handled, right? People are addressing these things, whether they're through complaints or legal action, whatever it is. That's great, and that brings back public trust. But back then, nobody was really, at least you didn't see that happening as often as you see now. Now there's more cameras, there's no more video about that. But yes, my parents were very much the, you can't trust the cops, that type of thing. And then, of course, when you're taking advice from people that have been, my extended family, some of them that were in and out of, jail or prison.
Yeah.
And that's your advice, right? Like you're going to see it a certain way. You're not going to see it the way that you would hope someone, you're not going to get an objective perspective on this type of thing. And so it was very much you can't trust, this type of situation. And I think that can be detrimental very much because, if that's a young person's interaction
Mm-hmm.
with family members or whoever you're being taught by, whatever guardian that you might have, and then all of a sudden you interact with police, it could turn into a very dangerous situation pretty quickly.
Mm.
And they don't know any different until you have someone tell someone different. And that's something that, again, these types of things, they stick with me now as I continue to talk to people about these things these days.
So you can you talk a bit about, you had a family member that was actually killed by police?
Mhm.
Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, sure. It was a tough situation just because, that I was in law enforcement at the time.
Mm.
And, he and I'll just call him JT. He and I grew up together. He actually, funny, he and I look more alike than my siblings do. We really had like favored each other,
Yeah.
and it was no mistaking that we were related. So we grew up together, and one of us went down a different one path, and the other went down another. He first was arrested and was sentenced to prison when I was 17. He was a year and a half older,
Mm.
and so he ended up going to prison early he did I think a 3 to 9 stretch, got out in 3. uh, and it was I think it was an attempted robbery. And he, and I went to college at that point. He got out. I think my sophomore year. No, yeah, got out my sophomore year. Ended up getting in a little bit of trouble again. Not a little bit. Another very serious crime that he was involved in. Went back and did a 6 to 12. Got out in six.
Wow.
And now I'm in law enforcement by this time. And the next time he got out, it was different. He was doing really well. I saw him the Christmas before he was killed. I saw him during Christmas. He was killed that following April. And I was in law enforcement at that point. I was home. He had a job. He had an apartment. He got his GED. He was spending time with his kids. Everything seemed to be going great. And I remember him saying, "I'm not going back."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Great. We don't want you to go back. And it sounds like you're doing the right thing." Fast forward, I get up, and I had been in touch with him a few times between Christmas and when he was killed. So in April, that following year, he ends up, he's at my mother's house. Again, everybody's really happy to see that he's doing well. She gave him a lot of, like he didn't even know what thread count was. She gave him brand new sheets for his bed, and had a freezer. She had a freezer full of meat that she had just went shopping, and she was like, "Take what you want." Gave him, food. She likes to shop on QVC back then. And so she had a bunch of boxes in the house of like pots and pans, gave him all this stuff. Right. And people were just, we were just really proud of him. He leaves, he ends up getting pulled over. He gets pulled over because they're actually looking for him.
Oh.
Sidebar, he had a negative interaction with someone earlier in the day in regards to there was a dispute, and allegedly there was a firearm that he was in possession of that I believe he brandished.
Mm.
They ended up doing a search for him. They had a warrant out for him. They pulled him over. He knew there was a gun in the car. He decided, that he wasn't going back,
Mm-hmm.
and he decided to resist. And he continued to fight the police officers. Ended up reaching into the car to retrieve the firearm. They tased him. Didn't work. His shirt was kind of thick. Taser the prongs got stuck in his shirt.
Mm-hmm.
And he was able to retrieve the firearm. He actually pointed it at one of the officers at their head. And luckily that officer moved his head in time. But, I guess you can probably imagine a gun going off that close to your face probably feels like you were shot.
Yeah.
This officer falls. The other officer goes to take cover behind the vehicle, ends up shooting him in the back. And he takes off, starts running, firing back at the officers. They did what they were trained to do.
Mm-hmm.
They got to their feet and they returned fire, hitting him multiple times. And he died. And, these are types of things that we see and that we hear in law enforcement, right? Like we hear these types of reports. We see these types of things, we're like, "Oh, that's terrible." When you imagine it's someone that you love and
Mm-hmm.
someone that you had all of these personal experiences with, man, it's a different situation because now I'm on both sides of it.
Yeah.
Like I said, I understand what those officers did. I get it. I would have done the same thing. On the other hand, it almost felt like an affront to me because he tried to kill someone that was just doing their job.
Mm-hmm.
And, he could have stopped those, men from going home to their families because of, something he was involved in. There's two sides of things, right? And, I was very torn. And, it wasn't just like the law enforcement folks that are like terrible guy that tried to kill cops.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just the family that's just feeling the loss and saying police are horrible. I'm feeling I'm torn,
Yeah.
in this type of situation. And, but it really said a lot to me at that point about there's more to the story. And I remember explaining, I actually wrote a column, not a column, but it was like a blog post. I was responding to all of these accusations about my family. Like, these are the things that happen. Oh, you guys must be terrible people. I bet you they're all criminals.
Oh,
and
really?
all of these things. I had no idea
Yeah.
that I was in law enforcement doing the things that I was doing in the community, some things that had never been done before in my state. And so, I gathered myself and I wrote. I remember crying while I was writing this, and I was saying, like, first of all, I started off, I was like, I'm a law enforcement officer, and I'm also this man's cousin. And I explained a little bit what I explained to you.
Mm.
He and I grew up together, but we took on different paths. And he did the things that he did. I'm living this life that I'm living now. Decisions have to be made early on about these things. And I remember the the uh, their response to that from the community. Just like people were like, "Oh my God, I had no idea."
Hmm.
That his family's law enforcement were saying all these horrible things, and next thing you know, this like the conversation shifts. Again, a lot of these things are all these things that happen kind of make me who I am today, and seeing what people need to learn about both sides of things.
Yeah.
And it helped me become more objective in my approach to explaining these things to people. And these things I don't happen. It doesn't happen for any just no reason. I feel like these things happen to me because now I'm in a place and at a time where I can actually relate
Mhm.
to these types of situations that some people will only see on television, or some people might only experience on one side of things or the other, but not both.
Yeah. Well, that's a good outlook to have, because some people have something happens to them and they get in these situations and they just think the worst of it, and they don't look for solutions. They don't look for ways to improve things. They just complain or say things that maybe aren't true. But if you can make something out of it, okay, this happened to a family member. Maybe we can teach some people some things out of this, make it better for them. That's definitely hard to do, but it's that initiative, right? That taking that initiative and having some control over the situation, you take that back. And now I think that keeps you from getting maybe in a state of depression or whatever else you might be coming across. One thing I was wondering too is, what do you think? Like, so you're saying your cousin was doing good, and everybody sees like everything's going well, but what would keep him uh, in that scenario where he's doing good, but he's still got a gun on him, and ends up having this interaction? So, was there other things still going on behind the scenes? Like it's that hard to get out of that lifestyle?
I assume it is for a lot of people.
Hmm.
You live a certain way for a long time, and the way our minds work, we attach to the things that are routine for us. We get up, you and I probably put a wallet in our pocket every day. People like us that are armed also, even off duty, you might carry off duty. I do. And so it's, or I did, and I continue to,
Hmm.
right? That's something that just makes sense to me. I think a lot of these folks that, when you engage in a certain lifestyle, no matter whether it's great or whether you're doing something criminal, it's something that it's a hard habit to break. And for whatever reason, I still don't know the reason why he might have had a firearm on him. I don't know what
Okay.
he was involved in at that time. I was in college. I'm not in college. I was in college the second time that he went to prison.
Hmm.
The first time, the third time was, well, this last in situation was when I was in law enforcement. And, even those times I had no idea he was involved in some of these things. I remember the second time he went back, uh, I was in college, and that was a tough situation. That was a really tough situation because my father had given him a job,
Hmm.
and the situation took place on my father's rental property. And so it was a bad situation for him, for my dad, but it was also happening at a bad time. My uncle was murdered a few days before. My mother's brother was murdered a few days before. JT goes back, gets locked up again. A few days after that, my cousin Butch was killed.
Wow.
This all happened in about 10 days. And again, imagine feeling that torn. And now I'm in college at this point, getting all of this news back to back to back.
Hmm.
It's some of these things you wonder, like, and I remember actually one of my friends asked me at the time, like, how did you manage to not get involved in that, man? And, and again, a lot of these things are decisions. And there are some key things that I remember happening that made me think a little bit differently about the type of person I wanted to be.
Mm.
Um, and I remember talking to my friend about that. Like, I remember some of my aunts, my cousins' mothers, I would ask them, "Hey, how's he doing?" And sometimes it was the look on their face when they would say, he's all right.
Yeah.
I did not like that. I did not ever want anybody to talk about me
Yeah.
that way, like they pity me, And I just remember like looking at them whenever I would ask, "Hey, how's he doing?" He's all right. I'm like, oh,
Well, that disappointment, that's a pretty motivating
yes.
factor too. You don't want to disappoint your
For me,
parents.
it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and more so for anything, it's just I wouldn't. I felt like I had enough pride in myself, even at that time, that I did not want to be seen that way. I wanted to be a better person. I
Mhm.
wanted to do something different. Even then, again, I knew that was something that was wired in me that way, and that was a big motivating factor. It absolutely was. And so, a lot of these things happen early on that just as part of my childhood, my teenage years, and even my early years in law enforcement. That it took this turn. Now I look at things and it actually helps me be able to connect with people in a different way.
What what did your family say? Like when your cousin gets killed and you're in law enforcement, do people come to you looking for reasoning and answers? Or do they get mad at you or anything like that?
No one got mad. No one got mad. I think that would be the assumption because that's a lot of what happens today.
Yeah.
People get upset. They turn it on all law enforcement like you had something to do with it, as if you're not an individual, as if you don't live in a different state or
Hmm.
a different city or a different country,
Yeah.
or in a different country, like like you're in.
Yeah.
People don't realize that we're just different people. So it's a really interesting how people perceive that, but it didn't happen at that time. It didn't bother me that much. I remember people making a couple of statements. Again, why I talk about some of the things that I talk about. I remember one of my relatives were like, "Hey, well, why couldn't they just shoot the gun out of his hand?"
Hmm.
But, you know, there's several reasons for that.
Yeah.
And on top of that, it's a self defense situation, and he didn't give them that type of courtesy in any type of situation either, right? And then you get the response, well, that's your family. I'm like, yeah, but this is also that. And if I'm that other officer, that's my life,
Yeah.
and I want to go home. Right? So you have these conversations, and again, you have to explain this stuff to people that you would think certain things would be just, I don't want to say common sense. It would seem like it would naturally occur to you, I guess is a nicer way of saying it.
Yeah.
But I have these conversations to this day where, people see these situations like, well, why did the police officer shoot him that way? And depending on the situation, Nathan, I'm very honest. And
Hmm.
I'm saying, like, I think that officer was very tolerant because I probably would have shot him about 15 seconds earlier.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and I say that I'm very honest because I'll explain the use of force model, the policies, the procedures, the tactics, and certain things, and how police officers are going to respond to certain types of behavior. Some people have certain boundaries, and depending on your skills, your boundary, your perspective of a certain situation, you're going to respond in a certain way, depending on your tools, distance, all these things.
Yeah.
And and I explain these things to people, and they get it when I break it down. But it's something that you actually have to take time to explain to people because otherwise they just take what they see and what they hear and they formulate their own opinion out of their own experiences.
Well, especially nowadays with social media. And I gotta say, I feel like people are just generally getting lazier. So people don't even read now. They just see a headline and they take that line or two and the top of the article, and that formulates their opinion. You're like, who wrote that? Look at the sources on that, because I mean, there's people putting stuff out there that also have an agenda and they're making money off of stuff. So you got to be careful with who you trust, what you're reading, what you're believing.
Right? Could I say something on
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Because
Go
that's
ahead.
a touchy point for me right there. It's one of the things that I want to believe. I really want to believe, and call me naive, but I'm just maybe hopeful. I really want to believe the media wants to do better, and I think there are a lot of journalists out there that are attempting to come out and be a lot more informative and more objective. A lot of the prime time
Hmm.
news that are kind of raking in, the paper behind a lot of these situations. I think that is what is cause for concern.
Yeah.
When you see a headline and I see that it says white cop shoots black man, you have to explain to me why that was even in the headline to begin with.
Hmm.
Did race have a specific issue to do with that? Was he pressing on his trigger and screaming racial slurs at this person while this was going on? Other than that, it just seems very provocative and immediately hits the general public in a way where they're saying, it happened again.
Yeah. 100%.
They did it again. This keeps happening to us. And again, if you're only seeing it that way and you don't have the information, Nathan, I get it. I get it, which is why I take the time to explain to people, because if not, you very much feel like you might be under attack.
Yeah.
All right. If you don't have that information and maybe you don't know how to dig, to research it a little bit, or maybe you don't have anybody to talk to. And a lot of times, most people don't have that type of interaction with law enforcement or anybody that they trust enough that's going to be objective and say, no, that's nonsense.
Hmm.
That's not real. That's not what it is. And the other person's like, you would say that,
Yeah.
right? It's that type of thing, which is why I approach things in such an objective way. And because I want to be trusted that way. I don't lean to either side. I don't care how you feel about it. I'm telling you what it is.
Yeah.
This is what it is. Take what you want from it, and make a good decision. Whether it's about your safety or whether it's about police reform, you do that. But I'm not going to tell you what to do, nor am I going to take one side or the other. I'm just going to make sure that you are as informed as you can possibly be
Hmm.
in these types of situations.
Yeah. And you know what? I think, well, that's why I like a lot of the content that you put out. And I think it's very valuable. I
Thanks.
haven't seen anyone else doing those type of things. And I'd say what would be the word? Like at the level of production that you do it at. So the videos are very good.
Thank
The
you.
messaging is very good. I think the biggest thing that I get out of it, and when we get into the Black Sanctuary and then the book, is that you're putting the agency back in the person's hands. You're saying you have control in these situations where a lot of the narratives, like we even get this in the media up here, um, where they just put out articles saying, they'll interview a black guy and he'll just say, I'm just scared to drive around. And when police drive by me, I start shaking and I'm scared of this, I'm scared of that. And it's like, but based on what? And what interaction have you had that justifies that? But they'll print that, and then that starts scaring people, and they think I don't have control in this situation. All of this, everything that happens to me, is up to somebody else. And it's like, no, that you have a role to play. You control a lot of the outcome of what goes on, and 99.9% of police interactions, there's millions of them in each of our countries every day, go totally smoothly, and good
Yep.
relationships are built. Uh, so why are we only, you know, taking that 0.1% or whatever it might be and saying this is the example, this is the new norm or something? So yeah, I think you're putting it out there really well.
If it bleeds, it leads, right? If it
Yeah,
bleeds, it leads. That's a lot of the unfortunate approach, and so it becomes a repetitive cycle. An incident happens, people watch the incident, they're outraged, they see the provocative headlines, it's put on social media, then you go on social media, you comment, you
hmm,
react to it, you forward it, you share it. They play it at top of the hour every hour for the next 10 days to 2 weeks, right?
hmm,
Then they come back and revisit that. Then you see it on YouTube, and a couple of months later, and you're like, "Oh, I never saw this." And then you start commenting on it. It keeps going and going
yeah,
and going. And so if you're a black, if you're black American, Canadian, wherever you're at, and this is what the focus is, if that's all you see, then that's your reality, right? This is always happening because literally, think about it, especially during COVID. All right, everybody's stuck in the house,
hmm,
and then all of a sudden, you keep seeing black people getting killed by police. And if you don't know what I know, and I'm like looking at it objectively, I'm not looking at it as, oh, we're under attack. I never looked at it that way. I looked at it objectively, like what happened here. But if you don't know, that's how you're going to see it. And so I got those same phone calls, exactly what you're talking about. I had friends and family. folks calling me from all over the country.
Yeah.
Derrick, why is this happening to us, right?
Yeah.
Why did they do him like that? Why didn't they just do this? And here's the thing, and this was the beginning of the Black Sanctuary, which is a good segue. This was the beginning because I got so many phone calls and I kept explaining the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm yelling at the television and I'm arguing with Don Lemon and Rachel Maddow, and I'm arguing with Tucker Carlson. I'm arguing with everybody. I'm like, no, you said this, but you didn't say the other part.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you got to give it all. And depending on who called me, I would know exactly who they watched and where they got it from. Right.
That's
And
pretty good.
so it was, yeah. And I would see that and I was like, I get it. Let me explain it to you this way. And Nathan, when I would break it down and they would call me back, unfortunately, after the next incident happened, because there were several between 2020 and 2021. And they would call me and say, remember that thing we talked about with the use of force thing? I didn't like what that cop did, but that guy shouldn't have been doing the thing that he did either.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, okay. Or someone would say, yeah, he shouldn't have been doing this. And, that officer had to do X, Y, and Z based on what you explained. And I'm like, okay, people actually get it.
Yeah.
And I saw it working. And that's where I started pursuing a little bit more with the Black Sanctuary and making that a company.
Just before we do get into Black Sanctuary stuff,
Sure.
Can you just tell us a bit about your transition into law enforcement? So, and what you did in there, and maybe then like everybody starts giving you the calls, and we talk about the Black Sanctuary. So,
sure.
What you do in law enforcement?
So I my very first experience was when I was 19. I interviewed with the United States courts, and that was pivotal for me because I was I was a psychology major in college, and around the time that I was thinking about law enforcement or going towards government at that point, I thought about social work. So I went in. So I did an internship one summer with the United States courts. And that exposed me, but it didn't even feel like an internship with just the courts because I was working with the U.S. Attorney's Office. I would get meetings and be able to sit down and talk as an intern with federal judges. The DEA, the FBI, the ATF,
Wow.
local police. With the U.S. courts, it was pre-sentence, pre-trial, probation. I had this totally different view of how these things work. And what was really big that happened during that time is during my internship, a buddy of mine from high school walks in and he sees me in a suit and he's in street clothes. And I'm looking at him and he's looking at me. He's like, what are you doing here? And I'm like, what are you doing here? And I caught a coke charge.
Mm.
And I'm like, oh man. He was like, what are you doing here? I was like, I'm working. He's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, I'm working. And I'll never forget his response, Nathan. He looked at me and he was just like, good job, man.
Wow.
Just keep going in that direction. I'll never forget that. And just, it could have been any type of response that he would have given me at that point. And he was just like, keep doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, and again, these types of things happen and you never forget it. You never forget that. And so after that, I was sure that's something I wanted to do. I had 2 more internships when I was in college. And then I went, when I first left college, when I graduated from college, moved here to Washington State, got dragged out here by a woman who became my wife. So I wanted to, and that my plan was to always get a job and work for the Fed somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
That's just something I knew I wanted to do at that level. There was a federal hiring freeze, so I ended up getting on with the Washington State Department of Corrections. Not in the prison. I worked in the field, doing field investigations, prison release, offender supervision, that type of thing. At that time, if you were driven and very ambitious, you could pretty much do what you wanted. And so if there were other task force opportunities, and that's what I started. Right? I started pursuing those types of opportunities. There was offender reentry opportunities. I remember the Washington State put out a memo that there was a $25 million budget for offender reentry.
Mhm.
And me being me, I looked at it and I was like, 25 million bucks? I could do this for free.
Yeah.
And I went and saw my boss and I said, man, I could do this. And I thank God for him. Stephen McWilliams was his name. And he was very supportive. And a lot of the reason why I'm here, and I had so much experience early on, is because he allowed me to just go with it and follow my passions. Some people, some leaders will stifle you; they'll stop you from
Mhm.
growth. He really wanted me to grow, and so he was like, "All right, that's what you want to do." So I went out to the community. I got chemical dependency, anger management, mental health, child support, life skills, all these things, brought them to one place. So when these guys got out of jail, these men and women, were released from prison, they had a place to go to get all of these services instead of just giving them a bus pass and saying, get this done and come back in 2 weeks or you're
Yeah.
going to be arrested.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And now they go back to jail. They start the reoccurring cycle. You're stuck with paperwork and all of that. Now it reduces all of that. Plus all of these providers now have more and more clientele. And so everybody wins. And so this was taken over by another young lady later on, a couple of years later. And as far as I know, it's still going on here in Seattle. I think on the second or third Wednesday of every month,
Nice.
they still do the same thing. And this has been years now, over a decade. So doing things like that. I had a work task force with a Renton Police Department. I started off as a liaison, and then I started working on the Spec Ops Division, doing street crimes. Then I worked for the U.S. Marshals after that for 3 years. Um, I During that time, I worked another task force, and that's a different type of situation. But then I was also a use of force instructor during that time. I was one of the lead use of force instructors for the state. I would basically train the instructors to train officers
Mhm.
in self-defense and shooting firearms. That was something that really helped me because now I started getting called to do more things. Um, I was on they had another initiative in Seattle, the Youth Gang Violence Prevention Initiative. That's something that was also pretty pivotal for me because I had way more relationships at that time throughout the government, city government, federal government, state government, just to, in law enforcement to be able to have more impact in the community. And I started seeing how these types of things could be done. Um, so I did that for about a year and a half. Then my last post was with back at the courts, U.S. courts, doing an investigation, and that was it. I left there, went into executive protection, did
Mhm.
that for a few years, protecting some very well-known wealthy folks. Seattle has a few billionaires, and we did some of that stuff around. We monitored that type of thing around the world too, and after that, I came into and I started doing things on my own. I started my own private security company doing physical security assessments. And then after that, I started doing this. And the security is also part of the Black Sanctuary
Mm.
as far as teaching people safety and security. So, yeah.
So, do you kinda maintain any courses or education on that side of things then? Like, you still go and do some courses in relation to is it like firearms or post protection or what might it be?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I still do, firearms training. So I worked with, so I've been doing for 17 years, I've been doing use of force training. So I've trained with another company, a private company, that were basically a special operations cadre of
Mm.
instructors, and I trained with them early on in my career, which also helped kind of catapult me into other opportunities because people like officers that are tactically competent
Yeah.
and have that knowledge and have that skill set. And I tell you, working with veteran special military operators, man, there was nothing. I didn't even realize how special that was going to be until I started achieving that skill set. And then once people started seeing it, when we were training and things like that, I mean, I stood out. Again, I became one of the lead instructors for the state. And, it's something that it really helped me. And so now I still train with them when we do. So I do some private, training with them. They own the companies that I train for.
Awesome. Well, that's awesome stuff. So people start coming to you, calling you, and asking what's going on in the world. You start up the Black Sanctuary. So can you tell us a little bit about that, and the kind of the nuts and bolts of how this developed and what that looked like?
Sure. It was a lot of the phone calls that I got. It frustrated me, just yelling at the television, having these conversations all the time. And to be honest, Nathan, I thought I should have done this years ago. I
Mm,
kind of kicked myself a little bit, but maybe I just wasn't ready. But I thought somebody else should do it. I just knew it needed to be done. And this was one of the things that I had no intention on doing. I was living a very private life. I was never on social media, never even had a social media account until I did this. And it was one of the things that I really enjoyed, like not really being involved, kind of being on the outside of things. But, at some point you feel like you have a duty to step up. And
yes.
that's when I wanted to do that. That same year, 2020, there were a couple of companies that wanted people in law enforcement or folks that had that some type of background to come in and talk to their companies because there were a lot of people that were upset about what they were hearing and seeing. And I was called for a couple of those things and did a couple of presentations. I remember one of them was supposed to be an hour presentation and 30 minutes Q&A. We did Q&A. It was an hour presentation, but the Q&A went on for almost 2 hours.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, again, all the phone calls I got, now I'm doing a Q&A for 2 hours. Another company that I did a presentation with brought me back just for a Q&A.
Oh, really?
So again, I'm like, okay, people want to know this.
Hmm.
And again, I'm very middle of the road. So, and I understand how the aesthetics of this. I'm a Black man. These are Black folks that are involved in a lot of the things that people are seeing. There's a large racial, there's a very big racial component to how people see this. And I understand how people see it. They're like, okay, it's different hearing it from him. But they're not getting one side or the other. And I won't go to one side or the other. I don't care what people try to do.
Yeah.
You're not going to categorize me. I'm telling you, this is what it is. You make your own decision.
Hmm.
And if I give you my opinion, I'll tell you it's my opinion before anything else. But that's not what I like to try to teach. So I saw that happening, saw that it was great. Following year, I had my first town hall, first and only town hall at 4 different police departments, 4 different chiefs that were involved in that town hall, and it was with the community. Again, a lot of great questions, and there was a big push for this type of thing, and I saw it happening. I did the research, see if there was competition. Nobody was really out there doing that, and actually, it wasn't even competition I was looking for. It was almost looking for a reason to not do it, right?
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
somebody else was doing it. And I didn't see it. And it was even more and more like, all right, man, you need to get out here and start doing that. And so I did. I called it the Black Sanctuary because of kind of what you said earlier. I heard so many people, especially Black folks, saying, you know what? I'm scared every time I see the police or I see the lights or I hear sirens and I'm afraid. And I couldn't imagine feeling like that all the time. But again, my knowledge
Hmm.
keeps me from the fear. And so when I talk to people about this, I'm educating you, but I'm also hoping that it's giving you a reason to not be afraid, right? A lot of times we're scared of things we don't understand. I'm
Exactly.
helping you understand it so you can make sense of it. And now you can approach it in a more realistic and educated manner, and you can decrease that fear every time you see blue and red lights or you hear a siren or some police officer comes up behind you. They're not even coming for you, they're going for someone else, right? And I don't want people to feel that way. And so I call it the Black Sanctuary because there was largely the Black population that has this disproportionate relationship with law enforcement. There's been these issues disproportionately, and that I wanted to be my primary target group. But at the same time, the law applies. I know the law applies to everybody. Okay. And
Yeah.
so I would say all citizens and especially Black Americans, because I want everyone to listen to what I have to say. And to be honest, I was a little bit nervous about calling it the Black Sanctuary because I didn't think anybody would want to hear me, but people get it, right? Like white, black, brown, tan, whoever,
Hmm.
people get it, right? And they're like, you know what, we get it, man. And I've had a lot of great support in doing this.
Do you get do you get a lot of other people from whether they're Hispanic, white, whatever it might be? You get a bunch reaching out.
To be honest, like I said, I'm very candid about things, man. I I was surprised that because I thought it was going to be primarily black folks, right? I was going to hear from black people all the time. It's not the case. I hear from everyone all the time, and it was shocking because I thought it was going to be something different. I realize now. Again, I should have thought about it, but when I did those, the presentations with those companies in 2020, they're predominantly white crowds. They
Yeah.
had a few black employees, that were there that would be involved. When I say a few, um, less than 10%. And and I would see that. But again, these are the calls that I was on the longest.
Yeah.
When I was talking to people, and I should have known that, but I didn't really think about it. But I hear from people all the time from from different backgrounds, different organizations. Whether they're predominantly black or minority, organizations. I hear from everyone, and I didn't expect that, but I love it because people get the message, obviously, and it touches everyone.
Well, I think that shows just how open people are too, right? Everybody is you have that curious factor. Uh, as the white person, I don't grow up in a black household. I wonder what goes on in there. I want to know the ins and outs, just as it might be the same way. So that's why you're going to get those crowds asking the most questions. Whereas if you just have like 100% black crowd, well, they're either know it already or they're going to suppose that they know it already. So you might not get
Mhm.
those kind of questions. Because you get a different crowd is going to give you different questions. I would I would kind of anticipate, the different ethnic group or the different race, they're going to ask way more stuff. One thing that I thought was interesting is how you're saying you're driving people toward educating themselves. Essentially, um, you fear what you don't know. You're afraid of the dark. Like you got to rationalize some of these things. I think the biggest thing is getting people to seek out that education piece. So if I'm afraid of something, um, why am I afraid? And maybe I should go talk to those type of people or that occupation, learn something about it. I think that's the biggest component is it's just like you would see with kids maybe, they don't understand something, they're afraid of it, but once you explain it or you demonstrate it, then they might slowly kind of warm up to it. So maybe it's kind of like same psychological stuff even with adults, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly right. That's exactly what I'm trying to do is make sure that I want people to be able to do their own research. And so when I talk about things, if you've seen some of the content, I talk about laws, I talk about case law, I talk about policies, I talk about use of force, the use of force model, I talk about being, traffic stops. I talk a little
Hmm.
bit about police reform and how to, think about some of these things from a more objective reality type of perspective. Um, I want people to do that because I don't want you just to Google something to get someone else's opinion.
Hmm.
I want you to be able to look up the law. And you don't need to be a lawyer to understand a lot of these things. Because here's the thing is if you're going to pursue police reform, I think you should probably know what it is that you're asking for. Again, people know, like I had no problem making that video about chokeholds, and I disagreed with the ban on chokeholds.
Hmm.
And you get my opinion in that because it's one of the things that I think is dangerous. It's something that should be trained, and it's not. It's something that should be trained better, not feared and banned because
Yeah.
now you're taking away a less than lethal type of use of
Self-defense.
force
Yeah.
and self defense too. And so I mean, it's something that people didn't understand because they see it. It looks terrible. You're choking someone, right? They're using this verbiage instead of lateral
Hmm.
vascular neck restraint, LVNR. They're not saying that, and people don't understand that. And so now we have this issue. And again, if you understand it, and I tell you what it is, oh, okay,
Hmm.
I get it. I shouldn't have been pushing for this thing because now here we are in Washington State. Um, and all of the amendments, a lot of the amendments they made, Nathan, they're having to re-amend them
Yeah.
because there was a knee-jerk reaction to a lot of things that people just didn't understand. And and again, that's so when I talk to people about these things, I want them to be able to go into this conversation with their congressperson, their state senator, their governor, mayor, police chief, whoever, that are making these decisions. I want you to actually know what you're talking about so you can get the reform that you want. Because now here we are in Seattle, and I've known the Seattle police chief long before he was a police chief. Great guy, Adrian Diaz, Chief Diaz, and you know he they're in a tough situation
Hmm.
because they lost a lot of officers, due for several reasons, but it didn't help that they did the whole defunding deal, and then they changed they amended a lot of the things for police reform, a lot of laws. So now you got officers that are just about handcuffed to their steering wheel and can't go pursue people that they need to pursue.
Yeah.
And now crime is through the roof, and you got businesses that want to leave because the shops are getting broken into, and all of these things. It's there's an effect that people weren't thinking about, and I kind of compare it to the '94 Violent Crimes Act, the crime bill '94, that they always want to blame on the Clintons,
Hmm.
um, but it's not that. It's the black congressional caucus actually backed that, right? Because
Yeah.
it was a knee-jerk reaction to all of the crack and crime that was related to crack around the country. A lot of the drugs and the crime and the shootings and kids being killed, cops being killed, all of these things. We got to do something about this. Let's go ahead and put in mandatory minimums and all of these things. And they didn't think about how it was going to affect long term. And all of a sudden now you got mass incarceration that everybody wants to talk about, but you didn't think about it at the
Mm.
time. You have to educate yourself on these things before you go making these decisions, whether it's for political reasons, to appease your constituents. I don't know. I'm not going to say. Just saying, you got to think about that before you go, screaming to your politicians, and they're going to end up making a decision for you if you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and people don't realize there's like a second, third order effects, right? There's layers to this. So, and people are people. You change something, if they don't like it, they're going to find a way around it. Now they're doing something else. Now you got to worry about that, and that causes other issues. So people just got to maybe slow down a little bit, and instead of the screaming and shouting, yeah, just kind of think, okay, if I want this, what are some of the consequences as a result? That kind of brings me on to a point I wanted to make sure we got to was just some of the media narratives. I'll say mainstream media because you did have a good point there earlier. And I have a lot of journalist friends that are good at what they do and dig into things, but the mainstream media, who's kind of putting out the clickbait and different things, do you see yourself as trying to counter those type of narratives that are out there? Is this like is this a fight that you're taking on? Because I imagine a lot of people that come to you with questions, that's going to be their source. So they're regurgitating whatever they see on those sources, and this is kind of the fight that you gotta. So is this just what the Black Sanctuary is about? Is kind of combating that?
Yes, it's definitely a challenge to them. I think the best way, I can't tell one of these major networks, I can't get them to do anything, but if I can get enough people
Hmm.
to start thinking a different way, right? And if I can get them to start educating themselves, at least they'll know how to observe and how to take this content and process it in a way that it's not going to they're just going to take it and say, oh, that's what it is, and take that for fact. I don't want that to happen. I want people to be able to look at these things and make a better decision and be able to kind of filter some of the things that they hear. So yeah, that I'm doing that in an indirect way where I'm not going directly at them saying, it's not a campaign saying change your message. They're never going to do that. They make too much money off of that, right? Like,
Yeah.
you kidding me? But at the same time, if I can, when I tell people, think about that headline. When they call me or they say something or somebody brings something up in a group or in a meeting or at an event, and I'm like, yeah, I hear you, but let's break that down. And when I do, again, I never get in the argument.
Yeah.
Again, because I'm always approaching it from an objective point. I'm not saying, oh, it's a political thing. It's a liberal, it's conservative, and it might be if you get into it. But I'm not even going to touch it. I'm like, you're going to have to make your own decision based on this information. And when I do, you're going to start scratching your head like, yeah, I get that, because nobody else is going to say that. So when you go back to the media now, when you go back to that, you look at it and you're saying, okay, yeah, I like watching this show, but yeah, that part right there is garbage.
Yeah,
Right? I want you to
exactly.
call it out. But the cool thing about some of these journalists that have that level of integrity, I love it, because I love reading some of their reporting when they actually start digging into the statistics, and then again, depending on how you feel, right? You're going to make a decision about how you react to that. I like hearing the objective information. Some
Hmm.
people, they won't argue with me because again, I'm objective, but they don't say anything. They're just like, okay,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
right? There's not much to say, and I think that's what I want. I want to see going forward, and especially this younger generation that I'm able to interact with now through the Black Sanctuary, especially with my book, The Police and Me. I'm having an opportunity now to have these conversations with younger people, and again, if I can start changing their minds early on. So this isn't as much of a trend, later on. Hopefully I can have that level of impact. But if we can do that, I think we're going to be in a really good position going forward.
Yeah, 100%. Um, I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time. Are you on like a hard
Oh, I'm good.
hour? You're good for a bit? Okay, because I want to ask one question before we get to the book.
Take your time.
Um, with kind of along the lines of narratives and stuff. So I'm kind of thinking, is this like a help or a hindrance question? But is BLM stuff, is that, would you say in totality with the media narratives that are out there, the mainstream media, BLM, has that overall been a help or a hindrance to the Black community? Or is it too broad of a question? It might be just a very general, but
That's a
I'm seeing what you're doing. And then I've looked at their website and they push like a different ideology. They are telling you to tear down institutions. Whereas I see on your side of things, you really offer solutions. You're like, yeah, all these things have happened, but let me empower you to go forward from here. Whereas I find a lot of the stuff that's out there right now is basically, let's go back, you know, 200-300 years and let's kind of dwell in the past. And that is representative of today, which it's like you said earlier, the law applies equally to people and it's written that way as well. Yeah, you get some outliers, you get some skewing of things. 100% that happens, but it's not 300 years ago. Like it's a very different
no.
world. So what is your kind of take on that world of things right now?
Yeah. This is my opinion. It's
Yeah, I don't want to get a
it's
protest
one of
going
these things.
outside your house or anything.
No, man. I mean, here's the thing. Again, I mean, I'm very, you can't really debate it. I mean, if you look at how it was handled, and it actually taught me a few lessons about how I pursue the Black Sanctuary. With Black Lives Matter, that was something that they didn't control the narrative right from the beginning.
Mhm.
They just, I think it's the statement in itself, Black Lives Matter, of course, yes. But at the same time, they didn't really kind of frame what it really meant.
Mhm.
People had their own definition for what it meant. And so now you start to lose control of it. And now you got chapters popping up around the country,
Yes.
and all around the US. And one person, one chapter thinks this way, and they think this way, and they're pursuing this thing that might be, it might be helpful, it might be extremely hurtful and radical, whatever. It depends. But they took this message and just ran with it. And then, again, because there was no really defining it, it became Blue Lives Matter, White Lives Matter, my dog's life matter, all guns matter, right? It became all of these things, and people really didn't think about that. They didn't think about that early on. So that's why very early I started thinking like, okay, look, if I'm going to put the Black anything in anything, it's going to be I'm going to define what I'm talking about
Hmm.
very clearly. And so I thought about that very early on. As far as how it has helped or hurt the Black community, again, it's just my perspective based on what I've seen, what I've experienced, what I've seen, what I've read and researched. I think that it has brought a lot of awareness, not just to the Black community, but to the world.
Yeah.
And different conversations started happening behind this term, Black Lives Matter. You would see, some people started showing their, no pun intended, their true colors, right?
Hmm.
Somebody would see a sign, Black Lives Matter, and they would tear it down and have a fit about it, right? And you're like, oh, okay, where'd that come from?
Mm.
You started getting these types of conversations. Interestingly enough, a lot of white folks started educating themselves around certain things, and it's always interesting when some, my white friends and associates are like, oh, Derrick, have you read this book? Sure, I also lived that. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it's these types of conversations that you have. And so, I mean, I think it was great for that, in that way. On the other side of it, it wasn't really helpful. People don't realize they made a couple $1 billion in donations since 2020.
Hmm.
I don't know where that money went, and that to me is horrible
Yeah.
because people gave money to this. Whether these companies gave, like Ford Motor Foundation gave $200 million,
Mm.
200 million just themselves, and it's and then again, I'm thinking about all the things that I'm doing out of one grant that I received and my bank account and friends, a professional video series, a children's book I put out,
Yeah.
all of these things, these events that I try to, all these things that I'm able to do, and I'm doing it because I know it's the right thing to do, and I see that, and that really upset me because I'm looking at it like you didn't do anything to help anyone with that.
Hmm.
And again, I won't get into what they spent the money on. That's a different conversation. But the point is there could have been more that was done, and it kind of feels like, and I hear this a lot in the Black community, that it felt like a scam.
Yeah.
It felt like a scam overall to a lot of people, and to be honest, in certain ways, it definitely did to me too. Just for that reason. But again, I more than focus on that, and I don't spend a lot of time talking about them, to be honest. It taught me a lot of lessons and how to pursue what I'm doing in a positive way, and to make sure that I'm smart about messaging,
Hmm.
and that I'm not picking sides, and that I'm focusing on things that can actually be changed. I'm not going to try to change your ideology. I'm not going to even try to pursue that. All right. If you feel like you're racist or whatever the case may be, I'm not going to spend time chasing that.
Hmm.
But I know what's written. I do know that. And I know what that means. And I can help explain it to you. And I can tell you where it came from with case law. And I can tell you if you want to change it, these are the steps that you need to make. That's how we work on changing things. And I think, when we get into these very broad statements about, race and cops and burn it all down and start over. It tells me you really haven't done your research, because if you're just looking at history versus the law and what is written, what you actually have control of,
Yeah.
and a lot of the things, the rights that we have, the opportunities that we have, and the rights and opportunities give you power. And so if you
Yeah.
understand that, then you can actually make moves that are going to be effective. But I kind of feel like some of these things are just redundant that I hear. And I'm like, yeah, I've heard that before. And where's that gotten you?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I do know if I teach you how to interpret some of these things, you don't you don't need a law degree to understand it the way I break it down. You just understand it and say, okay, this is how it applies to me. My children, I can explain it to them, my friends, my family, how I pursue police reform or whatever, or how I interact with cops. I can get it done like that, right? As opposed to trying to take on this large ideological idea.
Yeah. 100%. And it's empowering people again, where uh, it always seems to come back to that, having agency over your life, and um, just taking some initiative and being responsible for your own decisions. Really, you want
Yep.
to make something happen, then take the right steps and make it happen. So it kind of brings us to your book. I want to make sure we get onto this because I read it. I really liked it. I thought every
Thanks, man.
page had a good message that you could essentially take every page and turn that into like a whole discussion.
Mhm.
So, can you tell us how the book came to be and some of the messaging in there?
Yeah. So the Police and Me. It's my first and only children's book. I, uh, I really enjoyed doing this. It was. I didn't. It didn't take me long to write because it all I had to do was think about how I would talk to my kid. And,
Mm,
my little guy, and the things that he sees, and how he sees. He's, of course, everybody thinks their kids are brilliant, right? He is a smart kid, right? And so I think about how the things he understands, and then when I wrote this, he was 3, and I loved his reaction to just seeing me kind of go through the process. Um, and so I would talk to him about certain things as I was writing the book. And I was talking to him, and at 3, he was able to understand certain things. And oh, this is what you don't do. No, you don't do this. You should always do this. And I'm like, very good. And he would get that. I'm like, cool. And and it was easy to get that part to get done. And it just made sense in the way that I explained it to him. I think parents could explain it to anyone. Of course, there's a Black father and son on the cover. And I was thinking about that, but after a while, I didn't care. I just I wanted, it to be relevant to what was going on right now. And yes, my target population initially had, well, it still is, Black Americans or Black people in general, because I want folks to think about police and police interaction in a different way.
mm,
Again, I'm not trying to make you love police. I don't care if you love police or you hate police that's on you. I'm trying to make sure that everybody gets home safely.
yeah.
All right. I want that interaction, that encounter to end safely. I don't care if you're going to jail. At least everybody's going in one piece. All right. And so, the book was worded that way. I remember there was an illustrator that I wanted to work with, and he didn't want to work with me because it wasn't based on race. And I'm like,
Oh,
then
really?
you don't understand the law, man. Yeah, yeah. I was really irritated because I love this guy's work.
Mm,
But to work with me, you have to be about what I'm doing. You have to be down for what I'm trying to talk about and for my cause.
mm,
And if you're not about that, then I'm like, I don't want to work with you either. But it told me something. I'm like, all right. And so when he said that, he was like, yeah, he literally said, you could put anybody, it could be white, Black, or anyone. And I was like, yeah, I did a good job.
yeah.
That's exactly what I wanted to get out of that. And so I was happy with it. Even though he didn't want to work on it, he got the message. And so I was glad with that. I was happy about that. Found a great illustrator. That was a really fun process. Because I wanted the likeness to be of, my son and I, and the little boy looks a lot like my son. Well, looks very much like him. I aged him for the book just so we could have better dialogue,
Yeah.
and it was great just seeing how that developed. Her name is Sandra Fueras, and she's from Spain, and she's actually speaks English as a second language, and so it was so we couldn't talk,
Mm,
right? We had one Zoom conversation, and she's I thought she spoke English fine, but she didn't feel comfortable with it.
okay.
So I was like, all right, and so I had to think very had to be very detailed about my approach with the pictures, and it actually turned out perfectly because every submission that she made was almost perfect from the get go. And then putting it out, you know, Nathan, again, I didn't. It was something I did because I knew it needed to be done. I just didn't know how people were going to react to it, and it's been awesome. I just did an event on Sunday with Jack and Jill Incorporated. They are a 50,000 member group of families around the country, Black families that focus a lot on child growth and development. They bought 25 books for the kids, and I
Mm,
did. I always do a Q&A after I read with them, and sometimes during the reading. That was great. I talked to 3. I went to schools and done 3, 4 3, 4, and 5-year-olds I've had done readings for. It's just like, and then, PAL, the Police Athletic League, just bought 250 books back in New York. I'm going to be going out there end of the month and meeting with a lot of the city officials there and police department and things like that. Like, and they're giving those books out to all the kids.
Yeah.
And so every time I see these big orders, I'm like, oh, this is awesome. These are all future potential police encounters that are going to go great.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, these are future taxpayers. These are future, occupants of their city and citizens that they know the importance of, police, and they know how to interact with them. Like it or not, that's on you. But at least you know what to do and what's right and how to handle these types of things. And so it's been a lot of fun, way more fun than I ever thought that this would be, being an author of this type of book.
I've seen a couple adults posting reviews saying it was informative for them. So even for that age range.
Yeah. I mean, it was just cool because that was part of the reason why I wrote the book, because I would have Black parents. I had Black parents come to me saying, I have a teenager that's about to start driving. I have no idea what to say, and I'm scared to death. And I'm like, you don't need to be. Let me tell you what to do. I had teenagers telling me that they didn't want to get their license because they were scared of being pulled over by police. I'm like, you're missing out on a great freedom that we have to drive because of something you just don't understand. But the reason why people, adults can learn from it is I had people saying that, had a parent saying, I don't know what to do when I get pulled over, Derrick. How am I going to tell my kid what to do?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so there's a scene in there where I get pulled over, and my son, Duke, it's all told from his perspective, and he sees everything that I do, when I get pulled over. He sees all of my actions. He notices my demeanor, that I'm calm, and he sees it, where, I roll down the window, I turn off the stereo, take out the keys, put them on the dash, I put my hands on top of the steering wheel. I tell him where to put his hands and all of these things. And he sees everything, but he's still anxious about the entire encounter, which is why we get into the lessons of the book. But, that's how I went about it. And that's the reason why, was a lot because of the parents and different adults were saying, I don't even know what to do, when it comes down to this. So, and I thought that was something I was naive about. It's something I know. And so I just figured more people knew about that. Although we're seeing the reactions of people on television. I'm seeing that. I'm seeing that people don't know that they need to give their license to the police officer when you get pulled over, even though you're operating a motor vehicle, right? You need to give them your license. And so little things like that, I'm hoping that people learn, and I'm going to be talking more about in the next part of the video series, getting more into detail. But this is something that I think the book has been more helpful to people than I imagined. I really didn't know people were going to react to the way that they have to this, but it keeps getting better, and it's pretty cool.
Well, maybe you can help us out and do some driver education and just teach people how to pull over. People just stop in the middle of the road. People pull to the left. People go to the right. You're just like, is there no driver education anymore? People just do whatever. It's insane. So,
yeah, they don't teach it. It, and that's part of the research. So that's something else I have coming up. You'll see later on, but it's something that I did the research on, and they don't do that. So when I looked around all of the states, only one state, I think it's Virginia or West Virginia, has a quick little, like a 2-sentence, like a short paragraph on what to do when you get pulled over.
Oh, really?
And it's very basic. It's very simple. That's it. Out of all the states, we didn't see any driver's manuals, driver's education manuals that really identified that. And so, I've already been at work on that. It's about 85% done, but we're taking it to another level on top of that. You'll be seeing. And
cool.
There's a lot of cool stuff that's coming out of Black Sanctuary, man.
Man, with all the stuff going on in today's world, you think that somebody would have changed that by now and made that like a whole chapter or whatever it's going to be, but that's surprising.
Glad they didn't.
Yeah.
Now I got something to do.
Well, hey, you're a guy of solutions and getting things done, so that's awesome.
Yes, sir.
I want to make sure we give you time to say how people can follow you, find you, like see all your work. Is there anything we missed though before we get to that? I think we kind of covered everything we were looking at getting to today.
No, I think we covered a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about background, we talked about my experience, and then personal and professional experience. We talked about the Black Sanctuary, how it got started, the book.
Hmm.
Yeah. But as far as how you can follow me, my handles are at the Black Sank, SANC, at the Black Sank, for Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Um, you can contact us at contact@theblacksanctuary.com. So yeah, we have the YouTube channel, the Black Sanctuary YouTube channel has the first part of the video series, and we're going to be doing more of that quality, but I'm also going to be doing some more frequent videos. We have a couple of series that are coming out. We've been working, so
Yeah.
there's a lot that needs to be addressed. That I hope people, I really hope people start paying attention to. I understand, and I try to make it more edutainment, right? Because I know that's what people like, and that's what they pay attention to. But I want to be realistic. I see a lot of these. I learned that they're called cop watchers. These people that, excuse me, they record their interactions with cops,
Yeah.
or they'll see police officers interacting with someone, and then they stop and record, and they kind of instigate the situation. That type of thing, and then they post it, hoping that it goes viral. They
Yep.
get 100,000 or a couple million views.
Yeah, we get that all the time.
There's an entire thing out there. I'm trying to be the antithesis to that. We have a lot coming out, because somebody's going to get hurt listening to
Hmm.
these folks that really don't know what they're talking about. and I've seen certain things. I actually watched one of these, Nathan, and it was a horrible. The guy could have gotten himself hurt. Those officers were extremely patient and professional, and I'm glad they were, because he it was ridiculous. And there was another cop watcher that interviewed him after this whole thing, after his video came out. And there was something he said during the traffic stop about displaying his license. And she says, "Where did you get that from?" He got it from another cop watcher.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't something that he researched. It wasn't actually a law. He didn't know how to articulate it. I got it from this person. And his whole demeanor, he got from watching someone else. And it's dangerous.
Yeah.
And I don't want a teenager that's scared about getting pulled over watching one of these folks doing something like that, and they're going to end up getting themselves hurt. So we're spending some good time going through some of this stuff and making sure that people are properly educated and countering some of these narratives.
Great stuff, man. I think that kind of brings us to the end of the time. I want to say thanks for coming on. It's great we can connect. Technology is a wonderful thing.
Yes, it
because we
is.
connect from far away.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks for being on today. And if you could just hang on the line, I'll say bye offline. I'll stop the recording.
All right.